What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another episode of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast. I am your host, as always, Tony Mango, and joining me, as always, are the usual suspects that have been rounded up here. We've got Callum Wiggins.
Rest in pizza.
Oh man, I would totally love to do that right now. That sounds so good. Not just the pizza part, but the rest part. And Robert DeFelice is also on the line.
Well, you can't just rest in pizza. You have to earn it.
I don't... Wait, what?
Earn.
Oh,
earn it.
Yeah, I repeat.
His one
I
wasn't
want...
as good as mine, which is why you have to clarify a little.
I repeat. I want rest. Because WWE added another pay-per-view. I don't want to do this. Oh, this is why I mentioned before, donate to that Patreon or I'm going to fucking throw myself off a bridge, because it's going to happen. It's going to be, they're going to fucking put it on the WWE network, and it's going to be WWE Presents Tony Mango throws himself off a goddamn bridge. And people are going, 4 out of 10. He could have thrown himself off better.
And Tony, at least I'd make you a dead man.
Yeah. Well, we added this onto the schedule because things happen, and whatever, and we want to have some fun here despite all the extra kind of stuff that's happening. And we were trying to talk about some other kind of ideas, what main event stuff we could do this week and whatever. We just kind of settled on this, and this will be fun. This is going to be a Mount Rushmore of the Undertaker's opponents, or the Mount Rushmore of Undertaker Feuds. It's kind of like interchangeable. It's the same sort of thing. Who would be our 4 picks for representing the idea of people feuding with the Undertaker? Good matches, good storylines, different things like that. We got a lot of people to talk about. Some of them bad, some of them good, some of them amazing, some of them horrible. And we're going to do the same kind of thing that we usually do here with Mount Rushmore. We're just going to spit out some names, have some discussion about some possibilities of whether or not they can be potentially on the list. And eventually we're going to get to the point where we're going to have to settle down on who those 4 are based off of our debates. So we're all going to be in agreement, even though we might be disagreeing about stuff, of who those 4 are. And we, of course, invite everybody to drop their comments below and tell us your thoughts on not only our votes and our decision at the end of it, but who would you have picked separately? Who do you think that we're not giving enough credit to? Who do you think that we're way overstepping when it comes to them possibly being on the list? All the other kind of stuff like that. If you are doing that on YouTube, then you should be ringing that bell and subscribing for notifications of when our next videos are going to be out, which apparently are going to include an extra pay-per-view thing next week. So that's happening. If you are on iTunes, Stitcher, or the audio-only kind of stuff out there, like Spotify or whatever, then head on over to YouTube, do that stuff, or send a tweet, or follow us, or do all the other kind of stuff that you can do to kind of chime in and smart your words. Really quickly, just to throw a couple other extra plugs out there, you should be following us on Facebook and Twitter at Smark if you haven't done that already. And you've got the Patreon that I mentioned before. Go ahead and hit up that, throw some spare change our way to make sure that we keep the lights on here, especially with all the power outages and stuff that have been happening lately, because storms are kind of crazy. So that's a literal thing, not just a metaphorical thing anymore. That's something to be aware of. There's the TeePublic and Redbubble merchandise shops for t-shirts and stickers and other kind of stuff like that, if you are interested in that. And we'll do some other plugs and do some other kind of discussions a little bit later on. So let's get into the whole rigmarole, if I'm going to be 100 years old, types of stuff. Mount Rushmore, Undertaker feuds, Undertaker opponents, all that stuff. All that jazz. Hate that fucking phrase, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think we need to start tossing some names out there that aren't going to get on this list. Just to kind of, whittle it down a little bit. I did some research last night while I could of different Undertaker feuds that people had thought like top 50 feuds and stuff like that. And some of these were just like, all right, it just happened. It's not memorable at all, really. For instance, Jimmy Snuka. Absolutely not in the Mount Rushmore.
No, it's only a match.
Right.
Really. And it wasn't even a good match.
Yeah, that's a no. It's going to be a no from me, dog. I would say the same for the most part for Jake the Snake Roberts.
It's slightly more in depth because they had a partnership and then a rivalry, so it has a little bit more depth to it, but still nothing significant. Very formative Undertaker years at this point. I wouldn't go any further than certainly not Mount Rushmore material.
I mean, that's almost comparing apples to oranges in terms of significance, though. The Jake the Snake feud turned the Undertaker face, and he wouldn't turn heel again, I don't think, until like the Attitude Era, right?
Yeah, until the Ministry.
Yeah, around that time. Yeah.
So it does have some significance, but it's not gonna be like the top 4 of all time.
No, I mean that's not even on my list of being like top 10 for the most part. I think we can rule out Maven.
Well, I mean, if we're gonna rule out Maven, Tony, then why are we even doing this?
Right.
You could have stayed sleeping. I mean,
listen, that was a good dropkick.
That was a fantastic dropkick.
It's a great moment for the Royal Rumble, but it's the moment. It's not a feud. It's not a
Maven defeated him for the Hardcore Championship a few weeks later, or have you now?
That's right. Have you ever beaten Maven?
I don't know if they actually ever did do a match when Maven lost to the Undertaker.
Well, there you go.
They had that spot on the next year's Royal Rumble when Maven tried to do it again, and then Undertaker eliminated him because he's a bitch. And Maven, obviously, not the Undertaker. But yeah, Maven was fun, but it's not really a feud.
Are there any other ones that you think should just be outright like no, 100% no?
Roman Reigns.
Yeah, anything he's done post Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, I'd add Bray Wyatt to that list as well.
Yeah, I mean, I had Bray Wyatt down on my list of somebody to, I don't know, I guess you would call it like D tier kind of, because it's a no, 100% no. But at least they tried to do something, you know. It's the modern Undertaker era of the past like 5 years, maybe even a little bit longer than that, is pretty inconsequential. Like, we're not going to do the Goldberg one. That's not going to be in the top 4. That's not the top 30, basically.
I'd also rule out Shane McMahon.
Yeah, it's definitely a no for Shane, especially because that whole lockbox thing that didn't even play that out. Like,
yeah, the lockbox thing, yeah.
So
they weren't in a rivalry. He came out one time and said, "I'm nobody's puppet," and then the next week Vince McMahon was like, "I'm just gonna make my son fight the Undertaker."
I'm nobody's puppet, and he's like, "Dance puppet," and he goes, "Okay, sir." I think we can rule out John Cena too, because that feud was literally we don't have a feud.
Yeah.
Well, they feuded when John was coming up, but they never got to feud when they were both megastars.
Yeah, it was. I won a match, and Undertaker was like, "Hold on, wait until the last minute, and I'll just kick your ass."
That's pretty much the Bray Wyatt feud as well.
It was mostly a Bray Wyatt thing.
Bray Wyatt got redeemed because he did get the Survivor Series thing, which had a little more build. Yeah, but unfortunately, Wyatt, I feel bad about because that was the last chance to do something supernatural with the Undertaker, and they really didn't capitalize on that.
Yeah, they could have done something with Sting, and they didn't do that. And Wyatt represented this idea of like maybe we'll build another Undertaker, and instead, no. Obviously, this goes without being said. Despite my tendency to lean a little bit into the pre-Attitude Era stuff, we're not giving a spot to King Mabel.
I mean, he'd take up like 3 spots.
See,
that's true.
The interesting thing about Mabel to me is that he spent like a year where the storyline was just, they took my urn, give me my urn back. And that was his 1995, just hopping from person to person who kept stealing this urn, which was at one point just a necklace.
Oh, I'm putting a pin on talking about the $1 Million Corporation for a little bit. We're gonna get to that.
Okay.
But yeah, the Mabel thing was just sort of like, here's a big guy that can fight. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's still arguments to be made that even though probably the most likely route we're going to go through into talking about Undertaker's most prominent feuds should be the ones that we remember fondly, some of them could also be the ones that we remember pretty negatively, just because they help shape who the Undertaker is, and they might actually be more memorable, like going forward, than some of his better ones.
Well, I mean, that brings up something like Giant Gonzales. Because that is something that really did help shape The Undertaker, because it was like, let's get a big guy in there to fight Undertaker and kind of set this precedent. I mean, they had done it a little bit beforehand, but that, more than anything, kind of symbolizes the idea of, let's bring in a monster to fight The Undertaker. Awful match. The feud itself, I mean, it's as standard as you get when it comes to just like, he just happens to be fighting The Undertaker. But it's terrible.
I think we add Great Khali in the same discussion as that one as well.
Yeah, he was essentially brought up as the only thing that we're going to get out of these two, out of this guy, is John Cena and The Undertaker. That's really it.
I remember his first match with The Undertaker pretty vividly, because he essentially squashed him.
He beat the shit out of him. Like, for me, I think I was going on 13 at the time, and that floored me to see The Undertaker get crushed.
He pinned him with 1 foot at Judgment Day, and then he went onto a tear on a few other things, and then I think he eventually lost The Undertaker in a last man standing match on SmackDown,
which was supposed to be at SummerSlam, but for whatever reason they just moved it.
I think they kind of realized that Carly sucked by that point, so let's keep him away from the pay-per-view. Give Undertaker something else to do.
Well, we could probably even just do like a full-on worst at the end of this, but I would assume Giant Gonzales would be a possible Mount Rushmore of the worst Undertaker opponents.
Oh yeah, but there's an extensive list of these options though.
Since we talked about Khali and 2006, I want to talk about where The Undertaker went right after that, and that was Mr. Kennedy. I don't think we're ever going to talk about Mr. Kennedy as a, wow, guys, stop what you're doing and go back and watch their matches.
No, but I think Kennedy, the biggest discussion we could have when it comes to Kennedy on any kind of a show would be missed opportunities. Because, man, if that guy would have had the right time frame for a couple different things to not go wrong, he could have been something bigger, you know? Well, I don't think he would have been like megastar type stuff, but like it, you know, if that injury wouldn't have happened and that Money in the Bank thing wouldn't have been switched around, a lot of things I think would have been different.
He was going to cash in on Taker because they had to do the immediate cash in because Taker was injured. So it would have been Kennedy, and he just ended up being nothing.
That's almost like fate stepping in, you know, because Kennedy didn't get injured enough to not be able to do that if they would have just known a slight difference of his medical situation. And instead it ended up going into Edge. And Edge, I think, is somebody that's particularly noteworthy.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would put him in my Mount Rushmore, but I have him on my list of like my top like dozen or so.
He's definitely one of the most prominent that we could discuss about this. But I would argue that you should extend Edge into La Familia.
See, but when you do that, it forces you to discuss Bam Neely. And when you discuss Bam Neely, then I want to say no. But as Edge versus Undertaker, I think that was Taker's last really good full-time rivalry.
Yeah, I'd probably say that too. Like that WrestleMania 24 match is really good. I love that Charles Robinson moment in particular. They had the Hell in a Cell, they had the TLC match. It was good, like multiple people teaming up against The Undertaker because it takes a lot of people to take down The Undertaker. He gets his win in the end, but at the same time, he's got to take some lumps along the way. kind of old school booking of Undertaker in a new school fashion at the time. I really dug the whole Edge thing.
I mean, Edge was already pretty well positioned as a main eventer by that point, but it really helped establish him as, okay, this is a guy who can just be in the main event on his own and can bring other people up to that level, as opposed to being a main eventer when you have another main eventer against him. Because pretty much up to that point, it'd been him against John Cena or him against Batista or people along those sort of lines. Whereas after the Undertaker thing, you kind of say, okay, we could put Edge against, I don't know, John Morrison and try and make a main event feud about that.
Right. Yeah, this helped a lot. And this helped SmackDown a lot, too, because this was like the focal point of SmackDown for a while. They had some weird, like, roundabout types of issues when it came to stuff like Edge being involved with Batista, Edge being involved with Mark Henry and Great Khali and Kane, and different injuries happening all along the way. But the core idea of Edge cashes in on The Undertaker, eventually it comes to bite him in the ass, eventually they feud with this way and that way and that way. I like that a lot. I still think that I wouldn't put it in my Mount Rushmore, but I think that it's the first thing to put down as a potential.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the biggest issue I had with that feud was the banning of the Hell's Gate submission. The idea of just stripping the Undertaker because he used an illegal hold, supposedly, because that essentially just tarnished the entire WrestleMania win for him, because he didn't actually lose the title. He was just told to get stripped of it because, you can't use the submission that you've been using for the past year and a half or so.
Well, but that was all about Vicky being a bitch.
Oh yeah, I understand.
The deck.
I understand the thing of it. It's just like, I would have hoped they'd come up with something more creative. And this is WWE back when they were slightly creative.
And worth noting, that feud was the last time up until this past Sunday, I guess, where a woman took an intentional finisher from a man, where Taker tombstone Vicky, and that was a big moment. You didn't realize it then, but that was the last time you'd see that for a while.
Any thoughts on... let's toss a couple names out here. Sid? No.
Shitty.
Yeah, in more ways than one.
City.
Do you want to go for that match? Yeah.
Diesel.
No, really underwhelming.
Yeah, fun for the time, but not something that like stands the test of time.
Would have been better if he stayed, but since it was just a one and done. But again, fun for the time. I think people, especially now, because Kevin Nash is almost a meme in terms of work rate, but Nash and Taker were the two biggest names outside of the two guys fighting 60 minutes for the title. So I think it was a good rivalry. It was a good pairing, but wasn't going anywhere.
More potential than they actually got out of it, for sure. Bret Hart, he's had his matches. They had their whole deal with Shawn Michaels being in the mix and stuff like that, and I'd say no, of course, but
yeah, I kind of seen that as like that was a match to happen in between both an Undertaker Shawn Michaels feud and a Shawn Michaels Bret Hart feud, as opposed to a real Undertaker Bret Hart feud.
That's kind of the way that was structured.
And Undertaker was going through a really disappointing run as the WWE champion as well. Like, people forget how underwhelming his run from WrestleMania to SummerSlam was, because he had matches with like Mankind and Vader, and and Farouk as well. I think he defended the title against.
Yeah,
just a bunch of like.
It would have been that Vader match would have been Ahmed Johnson. Like, it wasn't. They weren't giving the Undertaker much to work with, but I think in fairness to him, they finally decided to give him a run with the title when Austin blew up. And he also had a match with Austin.
But that's true. But that also meant that entire run was completely overshadowed by the Austin versus the Hart Foundation feud, which was the real main event stuff on WWE at that point.
Yeah, I don't remember anybody ever being like, man, that classic Farouk and Undertaker match. As much as those two are great, that was not a thing, really.
I will say, outside of the SummerSlam match, which I thought was really good, their match at the Royal Rumble '96, they had some stuff on Raw, and they had a match at One Night Only. Brett and Taker always worked really good together after a certain point, but their rivalry was never anything to sink your teeth into.
Funny enough, Undertaker said in an interview that he gave in 2017 that Bret Hart was his favourite opponent.
Huh. That's weird.
I think the quote he gave Edge told a story about them working 45 minutes at a house show in Chile, and the quote Edge gives is that Taker looked at him in the locker room and said, "Okay, you, Shawn, and Brett are the three people that I can just go out there blind with."
That's got to be feeling like awesome if you're Edge, you know, to be compared like that.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't want to have a wrestler go out there and be blind, essentially, especially if one of them moves is a tombstone pile driver.
Hey, the way that AEW is going with some of their gimmicks, they might do it.
Oh, the blind librarian, that'd be great.
Yeah, just gonna have Peter Avalon there telling everybody to shush, and Leva Bates there telling everybody to shush, and the blind one being like, with like a braille book doing other kind of like gimmick kind of stuff. Like it could happen.
And then at one point they're all blind, so they could sing Three Blind Mice.
There you go. That's how you know we're booking AEW for the future. I don't know. Let's rapid fire a couple things here. Kamala.
Oh, it was the first casket match, so it has that to
On
it.
TV.
On TV at the very least, but yeah. And that was the time where instead of having just like the very easy to close caskets, he had to actually nail the coffin shut.
Yeah.
That's a fun gimmick, though.
It was a lot of fun, but the most enjoyable aspect of that was the fact of I keep saying Carmella now instead of Kamala. Kamala being absolutely terrified of anything the Undertaker did. He sold that very well.
Yeah, that was prime. Let's put over the Undertaker as this supernatural babyface forced to be reckoned with and stuff. Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
In a similar vein, can we add Yokozuna to that as well?
I don't want to. I don't think Yoko will make the top 4. I think Yoko was a very good rivalry for Taker, and they were actually profitable for the WWF in a time where guys like Lex Luger were not.
Yeah, Yoko to me is on that kind of like B- tier. Like I don't think I would ultimately put him down because I have 2 that I feel like we absolutely have to put on there, and then that only leaves 2 more spots. And I don't think I would ultimately give that to Yoko, but at the same time, I think that Yoko is the best representation of that era. Of the
Gray Undertaker era, which is ironic because he kills the Gray Undertaker. But I think of the Gray Undertaker feuds, that's the best one.
Because it's a big guy, so that covers like the Giant Gonzales, Kamala, etc. type stuff. It's a bunch of people feuding with the Undertaker to really put him over as, you know, you need this big overwhelming odds for the Undertaker. They have the whole thing with shattering the face, the orbital bone. The Phantom of the Opera look was never really all that great, but at the same time, it was a different twist to the character. So I don't think, when push comes to shove, I would go with Yokozuna. But being a child of that era, that meant a lot to me. You know what I mean?
Fair.
Well, as a child not of that era, I can't know as such, but I can understand it.
Yeah. I will say, we need to talk $1 Million Corporation. Because this, if you lump it all together as essentially Ted DiBiase is the feud, or $1 Million Corporation as like a lump sum, you've got the fake Undertaker, which it's horrible in some ways, but it's also amazing. Because who else could you do this kind of thing with?
Kane, apparently.
Kane, yeah.
They tried to do it with Kane, with Luke Gallows, and you've had like some stuff in the past where it's like
Sin
parody type stuff of like, well, yeah, there's Sin Cara too, but you've had like Gold Dust has like blue dust and like, like some jokey kind of stuff, but like the fake Undertaker thing was a big deal for that SummerSlam. And, kind of bringing up the idea of like, they got the best possible look-alike in a lot of ways. You could still tell which one was which. But if you're a 6-year-old kid or something, that's fucking clone Undertaker. That's, Metal Sonic against Sonic the Hedgehog, or it's the Green Ranger against the White Ranger, or you know what I mean? Like that, during that time frame, me being a kid, fake Undertaker was like, wow, this is like breaking ground, And you had the other kind of stuff that we were saying earlier, Rob mentioned, this idea of feuding with the Undertaker based off of just, you're the next guy that steals the urn. You've got the football is passed to you. It's King Kong Bundy, Erwin R. Shyster, the Supreme Fighting Machine, Kama Mustafa, who melts it down and turns it into a fucking necklace. It's silly, it's stupid, it's ridiculous. It was amazing. I think $1 Million Corporation is a potential. Which is insane.
I'd say it's potential, but it's one of the ones that obviously I could only watch going back and looking at it. And when you go back and look at it from a like mid-teenager to young adult thing, it's some of the worst matches that you could possibly see in succession revolving around one feud. Because the match with the fake Undertaker is terrible. The match with Kama Mustafa is completely forgettable and built around the fact that he's using a melted urn as a chain weapon. And then the match with King Kong Bundy is atrocious at WrestleMania 11, and I can't even remember any of the matches that he had with IRS or Ted DiBiase in that time. But yeah, I think for a pure quality standpoint, it's as atrocious as it gets. But from an entertainment value thing, in that sort of really cartoony WWE era, it really fits what The Undertaker was at that point in time.
It certainly does. The fake Undertaker feud, had I been, really watching, because I was only a year old at the time, had I been focusing on it, I would have believed that was The Undertaker, because it's a good look-alike. Once they put the two together, it's not so much, but it's a good look-alike otherwise. The match itself is boring as shit, and that's just... I like Brian Lee, the match sucks. The other stuff with IRS, it's silly because it's death and taxes. Get it?
Yeah, that I like that pun at the very least too.
The King Kong Bundy match, I would dare say, might even be worse than anything he did with Gonzales. I liked the Kama feud, but that's just me. And I think all of this is important because it all led to, all right, I'm done with this hokey shit with the urn. I want the title, and I want the title led to one of his best feuds, which I'm sure we're going to talk about very shortly.
Oh, I have at least like another like 15 or so names to just spit out there.
About,
some of them bad, some of them good. There's Muhammad Hassan, who just bounced around.
One of the most memorable in all of the wrong ways.
Now, I wasn't watching at that time, so the literal entirety of Muhammad Hassan is a rear view retrospective for me. I haven't seen most of all that stuff, so that's just kind of like an unknown, really.
A feud is memorable when it gets 3 paragraphs devoted to it in Undertaker's own Wikipedia page.
That feud. Were you watching Hardcore at the time, Callum?
I think so, but I can't remember like week to week elements of it. I know obviously enough of it, both by retrospectively watching it and what's going on at the time, because obviously I was living in London at the time that this stuff. Well, not living in London, but living in the UK nearby London when the 7/7 attacks happened. So obviously the big takeaway for anyone that isn't aware of this side of things is the fact that Muhammad Hassan was feuding with The Undertaker. Muhammad Hassan was a Iraqi sympathizer who was trying to essentially criticize America for their treatment of Muslims and people of Iraqi descent due to what was happening with 9/11 and the Gulf Wars. And he enters a feud with The Undertaker when he gets moved over to SmackDown, which is supposed to elevate him up to a potential world championship level at some point. He has a team of people in ski masks come out and attack Undertaker on a repeated basis, including one attack where they essentially come out, they attack Undertaker and garrote him with steel wire, I believe. And that episode of SmackDown aired pretty much in the same time as the 7/7 attacks were going on, which is like absolutely terrible timing on WWE's part. Obviously, they could not have predicted that stuff was happening, but they couldn't stop the broadcast before it went out. It was seen in very, very poor taste because it was essentially a terrorist attack on The Undertaker. And they'd gone so far off the deep end with Hassan from being this potentially interesting character that's showing this really deep political commentary that is too far in advance to the average wrestling fan. Not to say anything against wrestling fans, it's too deep for most people to even really consider anyway. But it's just going past that into saying, okay, this guy is just a terrorist. And then they decided once the 7/7 attacks happened, okay, we've just got to have Undertaker kill this guy in a match. Not literally, obviously, but just like put him through the stage. Pretty much, well, it might as well have been because they put him through the stage, and that was the end of his. And that was the end of his character. He never returned to WWE under any other name.
They had the whole thing where I think at the end of it, when they give him the last ride off the stage, wasn't there like a little bit of blood coming out the back of his head? And he really was killed off. That character stands out to me because of that alone. But let's think about this. Muhammad Hassan was skyrocketed to the moon. He got to fight Hogan and Michaels, and then he got to go to SmackDown and beat the shit out of The Undertaker. And the deal was he was going to be the number one contender. The match between him and The Undertaker was number one contender at SummerSlam, which was in DC. So they would have had the Muslim guy go to DC and win the world title, and then it all gets pulled the plug on. So while maybe not the most memorable feud for The Undertaker, a memorable feud because of how far it got derailed so quickly.
All the circumstances surrounding it influenced it that way, yeah. Now, like I said, I wasn't watching at the time, so I don't have any kind of like direct influence on that, but it's a memorable type of thing that I don't think can go on a Mount Rushmore.
In sticking with The Undertaker at Great American Bash, let's talk about the year before, because this one always confused me. Where Undertaker came back at WrestleMania 20, he's the dead man again, he's got Paul Bearer with him. Paul Heyman steals the urn, and that meant he controlled The Undertaker, and The Undertaker was just beating the shit out of everybody. Baby faces, heels, didn't matter. This leads to a concrete crypt match, where even though The Undertaker beats the Dudleys and can free Paul Bearer from this concrete crypt, he pulls the plug on him. And if you've ever seen it, it's on YouTube, them actually practicing the stunt. But then Paul Heyman just comes out the next Tuesday or Thursday or whatever, and here's your urn back, I'm sorry, please don't hurt me. Feud over. Does anyone know what the fuck that was?
Stupid.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was
yeah.
obviously stupid, but the feud was not over at that point in time, because if you want to go to extend Paul Heyman's feud with The Undertaker, you have to mention Heidenreich, who Paul Heyman was managing, for at least at the start of Heidenreich's run against
Oh, that
The
happened
Undertaker.
later, right? That happened at No Mercy?
Yeah, it was still 2004, but that was essentially what Undertaker's 2004 was like. It was a feud with, like you say, feuding with the Dudleys. It's essentially a feud with Paul Heyman, but the Dudley Boys are their chosen ones because they're extreme ECW representatives. And then he takes a break from Paul Heyman for a bit to fight JBL for the WWE Championship.
Breaks his back.
Yeah, and then he brings Heidenreich back in to do the feud with The Undertaker. So he's concurrently sometimes fighting for the WWE Championship, sometimes fighting Heidenreich. But during most of that time, he's still having to deal with Paul Heyman.
You know what? Random aside, that Armageddon 4-way with Taker, Booker, Eddie, and JBL, not a bad match. Really good.
And I'm
kind of
completely oblivious to this
Yeah.
whole feud, this whole section of time.
yeah, it's good that like this is a time where we were pretty much religiously watching it. Not that we can't really help but not religiously watch it because essentially they just give us too much stuff to do. But yeah, it was. I have to say that most of the Undertaker's feud that time, and someone who wasn't super familiar with the Undertaker dead man gimmick, because when I started watching, Undertaker was the biker. And so I had no idea why the dead man gimmick was so important until I went back and got a bit more further research. These feuds didn't endear me to the Undertaker at all as a big deal.
Remember when Booker T basically went to a Miss Cleo knockoff and got like a bag of dirt to help protect him from the Undertaker, and that didn't stop anything. Undertaker kicked his ass at Judgment Day.
Yeah.
These were the kinds of things that we were getting in 2004, and I can't say it was great, but I will take the Dead Man Undertaker over the American Badass any day of the week, and I still put his WrestleMania 20 comeback up there as one of the coolest moments ever in WrestleMania history.
Yeah, I stopped watching with that biker thing. That I've told the story before, but like I had been kind of not really watching wrestling as much as dedicated, and then one random day in class, my friend's like, "You see what they did to the Undertaker? He's a biker now." And I was like, "All right, I'm done. Not even gonna watch it. That sounds stupid. You're ruining my favorite character of all time." And then the next thing I know, 2006 comes around, DX comes back, and I'm like, "Oh, look, they went back to the Undertaker. Good." But during that time frame of the non phenom with the darkness kind of stuff like that, he had this thing with Jeff Hardy. And a lot of people really, really love that for a lot of different reasons. I mean, that's a good way to put Jeff Hardy over and do something different. Kind of like that whole Hulk Hogan and Billy Kidman type thing where you got a guy who would normally not stand a chance against a big main event caliber talent, yet the main event caliber talent puts him over to a certain extent and kind of tries to put him on the map and stuff.
I'm sorry. Did you just reference 2000 WCW?
Strange, isn't it?
Yeah, very strange. I did not expect that today.
Jeff Hardy is not somebody at all that I would put down as some Mount Rushmore thing, but it's something that I think is a noteworthy part in Undertaker's career because it's something that showed a different side to how you can use the Undertaker, what you could pair him up with, you know?
I think it's interesting, but I don't even class it as a feud. I class it as a match.
Yeah, for the most part.
But if I could just briefly talk about that match, as an 8-year-old kid, that was amazing to me. I was like, oh my god, this is just one chance. He's in a ladder match. He can actually beat the Undertaker here, because what's the Undertaker doing in a ladder match? He's not going to win. And I was fully invested, and I think only because we're in that range. Can we talk about how good the Vengeance 2002 Triple Threat was?
I can't, because I don't even know what
Callum,
that is.
Callum can.
It's one of the better triple threat matches of all time in WWE side of things. My bigger issue with that thing is it's a total sprint of a match. In fact, I think it ends in about 15 minutes, maybe tops.
Looking back on it now, it is really short, but that match, when it was on, was one of the best matches I had ever seen up to that point. So while I don't like the biker Undertaker, I think the ability to be human and sell was something that worked out better for the matches.
I think it helped him develop a bit more of a happy medium towards the back end of his career, where he would sell, but then he'd also have moments of like the no-selling, super cool Undertaker sitting up and like staring at the people, like staring them dead in the eyes, say, "Okay, I'm gonna kill you now." I think he approached a bit more of a nice balance towards the end of it.
It humanized him a lot.
Yeah.
And that's good and it's bad. I mean, it's good for the longevity of his career. It's bad for if you are pure phenom Undertaker fan, then you don't want to see that. But as much as I don't like the idea of Undertaker becoming a biker, I think that helped. He gave him, mic time too, like different, things that he could do. That way he was he wasn't the Undertaker. He was a guy taking on the Undertaker persona, and that changed the way that we look at the Undertaker. That way, you can have people call him Mark, and it's like,
And they did for a while, actually.
you know, you can do it, and it doesn't seem too strange. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you should talk like a couple of feuds from that sort of era of the Undertaker, because the one that sticks out in my mind as like a really, really great feud from the biker Undertaker era is the one with Ric Flair.
Yes.
They had their WrestleMania match. It's an old school guy up against somebody who's a different generation, but at the same time, they're two legends.
I love
What a
how,
match.
yeah, I thought, yeah, it's one of the like really underrated Undertaker WrestleMania matches. It's the first time he really starts to. I mean, they acknowledged it slightly at WrestleMania 17, but really, it's the first time that you start to see Undertaker put the 10 fingers up and say, "Okay, this is a streak now." And I think the match is so well put together. It's so basic because Flair can only do so much. I mean, to be fair, even in his prime, he only ever did really so much in the ring. But it's very well constructed. You have the Arn Anderson coming in. You make it a street fight so you can have a few bells and whistles thrown into it. It's a really, really fun match and a fun feud in the build up to it, because essentially it was just a story of Undertaker trying to convince Flair to lace up his boots and get back in the ring again.
Yeah, it's something different.
On top of that, I want to talk about a not so good feud of Biker Undertaker. Let's talk about DDP again, Callum.
It's already bad. It's already bad. I don't know if I've recovered from the last 2001 yet. Which obviously, just a cheap plug when there's an opportunity. You can check out all the episodes of 2001 of Wrestling Odyssey, and in the June edition, we talk in great detail about the match that. Well, it wasn't a match. It was a one-sided beatdown of the Undertaker against DDP from King of the Ring 2001. This stalker gimmick, even though I didn't think the stalker gimmick is the worst way to introduce DDP, or at least introduce somebody to fight the Undertaker, especially a humanized Undertaker. What followed was essentially Undertaker asserting his giant WWE-sized dick into WCW, into WCW's biggest orifice, essentially. Just like, oh, okay, this is DDP. This is a guy who basically stands for what WCW is all about. A guy who's never been in WWE before, who became organically popular as one of their biggest stars despite every obstacle in his way. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to fuck him week after week after week after week. And to the point of, you won't even remember the words the letters WCW by the time I'm finished with it.
To me, who spent so many years during the Monday Night Wars saying, man, if we could get a WWE versus WCW pay-per-view, this would be amazing, because we would have, like, Austin against Goldberg, and Undertaker against Sting, and Nash and Hall and Hogan against D-Generation X, and like all this other kind of stuff that would be so cool to do, and Bret Hart against this Chris Jericho guy that at the time I didn't really know too much about, but he seemed really cool, and like, you know, all this other kind of stuff like that. For me, after the fact that when I had stopped watching, that I came back to it and started to look at the couple of years that I had skipped, to find out that they did DDP as a stalker, and that he's obsessed with the Undertaker's wife and like all this other kind of stuff, I was just like, that had to have been somebody else's gimmick, and they just, for some reason, it was a typo and they put DDP in there. I was like, that they couldn't possibly have done that with DDP. DDP was just this guy that was just like kind of a Stone Cold type of person in WCW. How did they fuck this up? And it's, for not having watched it at the time, it still makes no sense to me at all. Like, why that got into a pitch, let alone approved, let alone followed through with, you know?
I've watched it and watched it again, and it doesn't make any sense to me now. So,
dude, you've got
so
Kimberly
crazy.
Page. You've got Kimberly Page
Yeah,
at home.
like, what
Why are
the
you
fuck
stalking?
Kimberly
Have you
Page is
seen
one of the
Sarah?
hottest women that they've ever had in WWE and WCW.
I know, and yet you're trying to go after Sarah Calloway.
I don't get it. Not
And
at
then
all.
the verbiage they gave him was, well, I don't really want Sarah, but I wanted to be made famous. And I'm like, you're the fucking WCW champion. You don't need to be made famous. Like, the whole thing was just, as Callum put it perfectly, Undertaker shoving his giant WWE-sized dick into WCW.
Yeah. There's a point. It would be a point in time that if I was watching, like, as someone of even my age now or slightly younger or whatever, I would have immediately turned on the Undertaker, and I probably would never have liked watching the Undertaker again because that leaves such a sour taste in my mouth every time I go back and watch what he did as like the locker room leader and the biggest dog in the yard. He was so full of himself at that point in time of his career.
But they've essentially tried to pass that on to Roman.
Yeah, the graveyard dogs.
Oh,
Let's talk about a kind of big name here. Well, kind of big name. He's one of the biggest that's ever been in the company. Stone Cold Steve Austin. I would argue that this wasn't a Mount Rushmore feud. I think that this is out of pure necessity of top guy versus top guy rather than actual, like, chemistry and logic. You needed somebody to fight Austin, and they turned him heel. They did this ministry thing. Vince McMahon's involved. But even watching it, that was like my heyday of watching, hardcore into this. This is wearing literally a wrestling t-shirt every fucking day for the most part, because that's like all I owned was wrestling shirts. Having a Stone Cold Steve Austin wallet, being the biggest fucking Undertaker fan, all this other kind of stuff. I don't think that's a Mount Rushmore feud.
I think it needs to be in discussion just due to the longevity of it and the fact that during one of the biggest boom periods in WWE's history, this was a prominent title feud. And it's extended from, like, I guess, like, middle to late 98 all the way through to middle of 99. But obviously that divides up between the Undertaker, like, early turning to the dark side and then the full ministry stuff. And it's really more of a feud between, well, it's as much a feud between Undertaker and Vince McMahon as it is Undertaker and Steve Austin.
Yeah, Vince definitely needs to get brought into the mix when it comes to that too.
Yeah. So while personally for me, it probably wouldn't get onto the Mount Rushmore, I think for other people it would do, and I wouldn't begrudge them for doing so.
I put it in that range of how we were discussing Yokozuna, Edge, $1 Million Corporation. It's like it's on the bubble, but I don't think it bursts and gets through.
for me, it's not even on the bubble for me. I'm gonna be honest. I think the build up to SummerSlam 1998, where once again, kind of like with Brett and with Diesel and with Shawn, you have the champion, and he hasn't really run into the Undertaker. They've had a few one-on-ones, but they've always been in different mindsets. This time it was, all right, we're gonna come face to face and I'm going to kick your ass. And while Austin does get knocked out in this match, in the SummerSlam 98 match, and it leads to it being a little clunky, the build-up and Highway to Hell video package is one of the coolest things of the early Attitude Era for me. That being said, everything beyond SummerSlam 98 with this feud is trash, and it doesn't even come into my mind.
Just to bounce around, Mark Henry.
Yeah.
No.
Nah.
Goldust is a no to me. It was during a time frame that I paid a lot of attention, but ultimately, it's just another feud.
It was one of the.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it was the one opportunity we could have seen Undertaker be an Intercontinental Champion.
Yep.
Yeah, that would have been cool. You
and
could have won
always
like practically every belt
because they had really interesting chemistry because both their characters were freaky in different ways. This is back in a time where, being Goldust and being androgynous was seen as like, oh, this is weird Undertaker vibes to me,
Yeah. Goldust has always been such a strange character, and it was like you had to have these two feud for sure.
This was the peak of that character, though.
Yeah, There's Ultimate Warrior. We brought him up earlier, but we didn't really talk too much about him.
Great way to establish that the Undertaker is going to be a big deal. Now, he doesn't win any major matches against the Warrior, but even in the body bag matches they had, like, Warrior would zip him up in the body bag and he would immediately sit up inside this bag. So they always made it a point to make him that Frankenstein-like monster that was eventually going to challenge Hulk Hogan.
When's the last time we had a body bag match?
I think probably when the Ultimate Warrior and the Undertaker had it.
That's going to be one of the stipulations of Gargano and Cole.
I wouldn't put. It's always my natural inclination to try and avoid putting Ultimate Warrior on any sort of Mount Rushmore. So
he's not on the list.
Yeah, so I wouldn't put.
Did he ever feud with Papa Shango? I mean, I know he feuded with the same dude as Kama, but like the Papa Shango thing seems like a miss to me.
I don't think that he did. I think that he had stopped being Shango before that point.
He was still Shango in like 92, 93-ish.
I know they did tag matches where Taker was actually paired with Warrior, but they never got to feud, which I think would have led to a lot of fun ridiculousness.
What else we have? We were big.
Well, we haven't said Hogan yet.
Hogan's somebody that I think is worth talking about.
I think the Hogan thing is overblown, personally. The Hogan thing is built around two matches that were over a decade apart.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, it's the one match.
If you count the one.
Okay, obviously the rematch as well. Yeah, so it's the Survivor Series match. Was it this Tuesday in Texas?
Yeah.
Yeah, so which is the rematch, obviously. So it's when Undertaker wins the title from Hogan, which is essentially just due to interference from Ric Flair. And then you have he loses the title 2 days later to Hogan. And then there's the match at Judgment Day 2002, which is an absolute train wreck of a match where Hogan can't even go up for a chokeslam.
I don't know. Okay, real quick, which chokeslam is worse, Callum? That one or the Goldberg one?
The Goldberg one was better.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say what would happen if it was like if you compare like Undertaker's tombstone on Goldberg to that chokeslam, it would be a lot closer, really. But I just don't think Hogan, even though this is the Undertaker's first title win, it should be significant. I don't think it really actually amounted to anything.
Well, I think it was important in establishing what Taker's role was going to be, because immediately, as soon as he loses to Hogan, they do the thing at the Royal Rumble where, he's kind of babyface, kind of heel, and then he gets into, okay, now he's just fighting monsters, which is like that Kamala, Giant Gonzales stuff we're talking about. So it establishes where he's going to be, but I think it's also worth noting that's why Taker still lasted the test of time, because he could have easily been in the same vein as an Earthquake or a Kamala, but he got to beat Hogan, whether it was by hook or by crook. He beat Hogan, and that went a long way in establishing this is a main guy.
Yeah, this is the difference between a long-lasting best character of all time, essentially, versus Mantar. And that's
true.
not worthy, I think, of putting Hulk Hogan as one of the top opponents, top feuds. But it's definitely like, if you were going to give a list of like the top 10 influential things that have happened in Undertaker's career, beating Hogan's one of them.
That's probably fair enough. Should we mention Luther Reigns?
Yeah, I would love to mention Luther Reigns, because between Reigns and Heidenreich, I don't understand how we were still doing this to The Undertaker knee deep in the peak of his career. Which is weird to say. Would you consider that the peak of his career? What is the peak of The Undertaker's career?
For me, it's around about between somewhere
07?
between it's between 07 and 2010. I'd probably say.
That's fair. Well, he's reaching that apex there, and I think that Luther Reigns stuff was just atrocious. This is them still trying to get people over at the expense of the Undertaker, and it went nowhere, thankfully.
I would ditto that with the A-Train feud as well.
Yeah.
Well, WrestleMania 19, the A-Train, Nathan Jones, Big Show's Big Show, so it's whatever. But like,
We can roll out
A-Train-
Big Show too, right? Can't we?
Oh, because Big Show is like I can't remember, and I know he's feuded with Undertaker multiple times. I can't remember a single one being notable.
Me neither.
The one I remember the most is it was in 08, and it's a match where he actually just knocks him out with the punch. And that's how he wins. He wins the match by knockout.
I mean, Big Show's the type
Yeah.
of guy that he's exactly what you would want the Undertaker to feud with. So how do we not have him in a spot where that isn't a top 4, you know?
Because they never knew how to book the Big Show correctly.
Yeah, Big Show's flip-flopping around all over the face, all over the place, babyface and heel. Sometimes he's incredibly, like, one of the most credible people in the world, beating like a Brock Lesnar type. Sometimes he's losing to like a Santino Marella and crying his eyes out. It's the most inconsistent character in the history of WWE.
Yeah, and that's been some stiff competition right there.
Yeah.
We can roll out Kurt Angle.
I mean, I wish I could put Kurt Angle
Holy
on this one, but
shit.
obviously, in terms of just pure match quality,
Yes.
like this is the guy who really kickstarted Undertaker. As like, even though Undertaker had good matches in the past, and I'm sure we'll talk about people that have given him a lot of good matches. This is the one where you kind of say, okay, Undertaker could actually like go in the ring for 20, 30 minutes and have a great match. And obviously, to do that, you have to put him with Kurt Angle because Kurt Angle could make a broom do that for 20, 30 minutes and keep you wildly entertained throughout it. Their match at No Way Out 2006, I think, is the most underrated great match of Undertaker's career. In terms of like, it's the one that nobody talks about, but it's arguably the best match of Undertaker's career.
You know, everything Callum said and more. Just Kurt Angle and the Undertaker, great in-ring chemistry. Very much along the lines of what I said about Brett. You know, great in-ring work, but the story isn't there to sink your teeth into, so it ultimately falls by the wayside. But that No Way Out 2006 match, Tony, go watch it during one of your sleepless binges.
I would say along the lines of, I mean, you know how highly Undertaker must think of Kurt Angle when, at least if rumours are to believe, that he did consider giving Kurt Angle the one to break the streak.
Specifically to say, this is 2006, remember everybody. I never had the WrestleMania match I wanted to have, where it's just an utter classic. I don't care if Angle breaks the streak, he's an Olympic gold medalist. I want to fight Kurt Angle at WrestleMania. So, of course, they gave him Mark Henry. And
Somebody else who had a match with Undertaker at WrestleMania was CM Punk. And they had a feud over unfortunate circumstances of Paul Bearer's death happened around that time. And they, in great wrestling fashion, turned that into the best part of the feud, which was CM Punk fucking around with the urn with supposed to be Paul Bearer's ashes inside of it. They carried that into this whole, like, technically a submission victory over the Undertaker and all that. Big deal at the time, but it's a no for me.
I love the build-up.
Yeah, the build-up's great. I would go so far to say, and maybe it's like overstepped a little bit, this is the last great match of Undertaker's career. Is his match against CM Punk.
I think that's fair.
I was there, and I don't remember being blown away.
I've gone back and watched it multiple times. I think it's one of the greatest matches of Punk's career because just how much he's able to get out of The Undertaker and how well the story is told. I mean, the one spot that everyone would remember from watching that thing multiple times is the go to sleep into the tombstone, which is where Undertaker just bounced off the ropes after getting hit with the go to sleep and then just immediately hits Punk with a tombstone. It's just so well put together.
I think what hurt that for you, Tony, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, after the 4 years previous of, wow, he barely makes it out alive because of the circumstances, it was a given that he was going to beat CM Punk.
That overall, just that WrestleMania was so disappointing in so many different ways.
Yeah,
You couldn't even get the fucking hot dogs right.
I think also people tend to forget that he also had a feud with CM Punk prior to that as well over the World Heavyweight Championship on SmackDown.
Well, I think Tony tried to parlay that as if they were the same rivalry, because he did mention the fluke submission win over the Undertaker.
Oh yeah, true, but it's
Yeah.
just a case of there was quite a considerable gap in between those two.
It's the type of thing where, I mean, he's feuded with people at different times throughout his career, and you gotta kind of look at the overall thing, because it's not necessarily like Undertaker feuds being the Mount Rushmore is this time frame to that time frame. I'm looking at it as overall.
Okay.
Like,
I mean, should we add Teddy Long to the list then?
is that much of a feud as much as it is the idea of a partnership in the making with the one-on-one against the Undertaker? Like, you know?
Hey, I've just got to say that just the image of Teddy Long in the back of the
in the
limousine.
car. The limousine, yeah.
Yeah.
How did it not go? Wait, we need to reshoot this. Teddy, a little less over dramatic, please.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what you should be doing when the Undertaker is driving a car in front of you.
It's like the same director was probably the guy that did that episode of the Spider-Man animated series where he's like, "Shocker! I'll fight you to the ends of the earth." Just like, you know, you can't go too far with it. Get bigger, broader, faster. That kind of George Lucas direction.
All right, I want to throw a really serious one out here. Batista.
Batista's worth talking about.
Yeah. Really big deal.
Here's why I'm not voting for him, though. Their feud, if I remember correctly, was more I'm better than you, and not something that was a bitter rivalry or like an in-depth storyline that also happened to have good matches, because it's like they did have good matches. They did work well together. That was a real surprise with that WrestleMania. But, I mean, not to bury the lead, but like we didn't talk about Kane. We didn't talk about Mankind. We didn't talk about Shawn Michaels, Triple H. The Batista thing, I think, is more of like, if I were to say Mount Rushmore of Batista opponents, I think I might put Undertaker on there. But in the grand scheme of Undertaker opponents, I don't think Batista gets it. I think he's in that Stone Cold range of being like, I get it if you argue for it, but I don't think I'm going to vote for it. You know what I mean?
The reason I think he should absolutely at least be in the very serious discussion portion is he, like Callum said, 2007 to 2008 was like Taker on a different level, and he was full time at this point, and you were seeing the Undertaker and Batista, who's a pretty big dude, just tear it down in every single match that they had, whether it was Last Man Standing, Steel Cage, Hell in a Cell. Yes, it was more about establishing dominance and being territorial, but that's where you get that like throwback to the biker, it's still my yard, even if I'm, trying to psych you out with these mind games. This is still my yard. I'm still the best big man, and I'm going to kick your ass. And I think Batista provided a great modern foil for The Undertaker, and that feud should be talked about.
I always look at the Batista thing as this is what the Diesel thing could have been.
Yeah.
I think what better wrestled though with Batista and Undertaker, but still, I can kind of see what your point is. What I liked about it is actually the thing that you seem to hold against it was the fact that there was really no story side of things, where it was just one guy trying to better the other one. Because I like that, because what other feud with the Undertaker has that? It's like, what other person really stood toe to toe with the Undertaker and said, "I'm just better than you, and I'm going to prove it in the ring over and over and over again"? It was just like two behemoths against each other who was so popular and driven to be at the top of the SmackDown card at that point in time. And with two baby faces, they not once did one of them end up turning heel on each other during like the real meat of their rivalry. I know later on they had matches in like 2010 when Batista was heel, but that was just that kind of like past the rivalry for me. Like in the real meat of it, they were still both the top baby faces on their brand, and yet they would just always butt heads with each other, just in a pure competitive sense, just try and prove which one was the more dominant. And I think it really brought out the best in both of them.
Yeah, I think this is one alongside Edge that you really have to sit there and go, all right, one of these two could easily make it on the Mount Rushmore.
Can we
say no to Big Boss Man?
Definitely.
I just want to talk about how much I fucking hate that. I hated that whole thing. Talk about, this is peak Attitude Era, right? This is 99's WrestleMania, and you got the fucking Undertaker hanging the Big Boss Man from Hell in a Cell. Whatever.
Can we also rule out Vladimir Kozlov?
Well,
yeah, we could always roll out Vladimir Kozlov.
He did pin the Undertaker.
It's true. I was gonna off a power slam. God, I remember that's just one of the things that's vivid
he
in my
caught him
mind.
from the Hell's Gate, not from the Hell's Gate, from the old school, and just power slammed them in 1, 2, 3.
I know, it's just ridiculous. I wanted to, while we've talked about Ric Flair and talking about Batista, we might as well try and complete the Evolution set by talking about Randy Orton.
I love this feud.
Randy Orton's worth talking about for sure.
I don't think it makes it on Mount Rushmore, but that's a very fun feud 2005 for me. And I think that WrestleMania was a very good match and a very believable, like, oh shit, he can lose the streak here.
It was the first time the streak really came into full focus in terms of like that was the thing that the superstar that was fighting the Undertaker was aiming to do. Because his previous feuds had all just been around like, oh, I don't like you, or it's for the title, or something along those lines. Whereas this one was Randy Orton is specifically going after the Undertaker to break the streak. And the whole Legends Killer storyline and the build-up to it was just tailor-made for this sort of feud. My issue with it is not the feud itself. I think the feud is very well done. From the WrestleMania match to SummerSlam to the eventual like Armageddon Hell in a Cell match, bypass the fact that Cowboy Bob Orton almost gave Undertaker Hep B. We'll try and go past that side of things. But my big issue with it is that this should have been a feud that realistically elevated Randy Orton to the main event level, and yet Randy Orton spent the next most of 2006 just meandering into nothingness until he got into the Rated RKO tag team. So he kind of just left this feud no better than when he entered it.
Yeah, but that's because they're being picky about him breaking the wellness policy.
I mean, that's I guess that's down to him really, but it's just a case of obviously he did get into the main event based around this. Like was in the WWE, not the World Heavyweight title match at WrestleMania 22, and like he did feud for the title. He did have feuds with like Kurt Angle and got into Raw with the Rated RKO stuff and fighting for the WWE Championship eventually. But it was only really until 2007 that Randy Orton really hit his stride.
Yeah, and I agree with you because this, for me, Legend Killer Randy is always going to be the best Randy. That was like the peak of when I was watching him and a fan of him. And this feud was a lot of fun. Fun facts, they had the last Hell in a Cell in the traditional structure. And their angle where they blow up Eddie Guerrero's lowrider was the first time I was ever offended by something WWE ever did in a storyline.
So we got some big names that we still haven't talked about, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Try and save those to last.
Yeah. I don't even think that we need to discuss it. I think that we already should just say, lock it in. Everybody knows it. Mankind.
150%. Mankind is I would argue I know we're going to talk about other big names, but in my mind, Mankind is the Undertaker feud.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will hear no arguments to the idea that he is not on the Mount Rushmore. He is 100% on it.
Yeah.
There is no discussion.
I'd go as far as to say if we were just making a Lincoln Memorial, this is it. He's the guy.
He transformed the Undertaker into the Undertaker that I think people actually grew to love, because even though he'd had a really good build up in the years prior to that with like the Monster of the Week type thing, the Mankind feud actually forced Undertaker to be a wrestler beyond, and that sounds like offensive, but it's the idea of him being in a more of a 50-50 scenario where this is a guy who he just can't shake off as much. This isn't just a monster that's leading like, okay, so you'll feud 3 months, Undertaker beats you and he moves on. This is a guy who's going to really claw at you for years to come.
It was creepy. They had the Boiler Room Brawl gimmick match. They threw in the Paul Bearer turn. They had the King of the Ring Hell in a Cell. It's 100%. Mankind is... He has to be on this list. There's no argument.
My only regret is that Mankind in years after turns into such a comedy character, because this feud, Mankind was a different kind of monster of the month. Mankind was a monster. He was a freak, and he didn't care about his body, but it also led to better matchups. The Boiler Room Brawl is one of the best matches that goes untalked about, because it basically was just a one moment thing where Paul Bearer turns, and there's so much that you can talk about here. But absolutely, this is on the Mount Rushmore.
Like forcing Undertaker to pass out with the mandible claw in his first night on the show. Like just instantly debuting this guy who'd obviously been Cactus Jack and Mick Foley in WCW, coming with a brand new character, a brand new persona, immediately targeting the most like devastating guy in WWE at that point in time, choking him out, going into like great match after great match, some really good psychology behind it. The Paul Bearer return, as you mentioned, obviously reaches the pinnacle with the Hell in a Cell match, just due to the sheer insanity of the entire thing. I think the funny thing is about when people talk about Mick Foley or Mankind, it's just nobody would kind of like mention him like near the top of greatest wrestlers of all time. But then when you start digging into people's like, we did Mount Rushmore feuds for a lot of people could have Mankind in that argument, just because he was so good at getting people over and getting the best out of whoever he was facing.
Well, let's talk about this. Mankind, there's no great period of The Undertaker without Mankind. There's no Triple H without Mankind, and there's no Rock without Mankind. And damn it to hell, he gave Shawn Michaels one of the best matches Shawn Michaels ever had. Foley is fucking top-notch talent.
Foley's great.
Yeah,
real quick, Mount Rushmore, Mick Foley. You got Dude Love, Mankind, Cactus Jack, and Mick Foley.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. That's the Mount Rushmore of Mick Foley. He's 100% on here, and there's so many. We could do a whole 2-hour podcast on the Mankind and Undertaker feud.
What's your favorite Mankind Undertaker match?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I got to go with Hell in a Cell.
It's just the one that sticks out more. It's in terms of a match, it's not really a match, but just for every moment, it's just as soon as you watch it, you can't forget it.
It's wrestling spectacle.
Yeah,
at its best.
I'm gonna go Boiler Room Brawl because I love early Mankind.
I don't feel comfortable putting Brock Lesnar on this list, but he's somebody that I think is a very
he's
good
very
chance.
much in discussion.
I mean, there's 2 periods of this, obviously, that we have to discuss. Is the initial Brock Lesnar run, because the Undertaker's the guy who established Brock Lesnar as, okay, this is the guy on SmackDown now. Because even though he'd won the title against The Rock and he'd been given a good undefeated streak to start with it, Undertaker was his first like big feud as champion, so it needs to establish him well. So they had them go to, I think, some sort of schmoz, Unforgiven, and then into Hell in a Cell.
He throws him through the stage at Unforgiven.
Yeah, But it's just the idea of Brock Lesnar beats Undertaker in Undertaker's structure of Hell in a Cell. Like, it's a convincing victory. He's standing on top of the cell with the title at the end of it. And yeah, so that really helps establish Brock Lesnar as this is the main event guy now. But then I think really the bigger side of Brock Lesnar's feud with The Undertaker comes with breaking the streak, obviously.
And to me, that's been retrospectively ruined in a lot of ways.
I think it was the wrong decision.
Definitely was.
Thank you, Goldberg.
The Goldberg stuff, the fact that nobody ever fucking beats Brock Lesnar because this whole, like, he's been set up to put somebody over for like 5 years, and it's just.
But you know who does beat Brock
happen.
Lesnar? Goldberg.
Yeah,
fucking
ridiculous.
Goldberg.
If this were Mount Rushmore of Brock Lesnar opponents, Undertaker would potentially be on that. I'm going to ultimately say I don't think that he should be on the Mount Rushmore for Undertaker.
I think just for the significance of the matches that they were in. I mean, he, like it or not, and like the match or not, I certainly don't like the match, and I don't like the outcome of it. Brock Lesnar is the opponent in the most significant match of Undertaker's career, arguably.
Yeah.
Which is the breaking of the streak. And Brock Lesnar, and that wasn't the end of their feud either. They went on to have matches at SummerSlam following that, and Hell in a Cell as well. And those were a lot better matches than the match they had at WrestleMania. So I think it's still in the discussion in my mind, but if I was to put a gun to my head, I'd probably say no at this point. But I keep it there still.
Let's lump in together Triple H and Shawn Michaels.
Whoa. No, I take umbrage to this.
Well, I'm gonna say it this way. To me, Shawn Michaels, he has a 2 separate kind of sets of career path with this, and Triple H has a wide variety of things. But I don't know how to approach this kind of a thing, because to me, like Shawn Michaels, for instance, Shawn Michaels has his feud with The Undertaker that leads to all the retirement stuff and the casket match at Royal Rumble and all that. That section, I say no. Shawn Michaels trying to beat the streak is a 2-match type of thing, and I still ultimately say probably no. And then they continue this thing on with Triple H being part of this feud with The Undertaker at WrestleMania. And then they're all lumped together as this end of an era. And then they're all lumped together in this Saudi Arabia thing. Now, Triple H has had his Attitude Era feuds with The Undertaker, and that's a whole nother discussion to go along with that too. But I almost kind of feel like you have to put them as, like, if you're talking overall, that it's almost like a 3-way type of mix. You know what I mean?
I disagree.
Yeah,
I think Undertaker's feud with Triple H is Undertaker's most overrated feud.
Okay, and I 100% agree with him. And I know
I'm not putting it on the list either. I'm not. That's not my Mount Rushmore thing.
No, but I'm
glad
saying
that we're
like,
all kind of in agreement.
You can't even group them in together because that's not fair. That is literally saying Triple H rode Shawn Michaels' coattails into a Mount Rushmore list. No, Triple H's feud with The Undertaker is bullshit. And I'm a big Triple H fan, but they are not these epic rivals. They're not. It just so happens that Triple H is the only guy in history to go from being the sidekick to being the top dog.
I would say that the reason why Triple H and Undertaker is a feud where people remember is because they're the only 2 people still around.
Yep.
Because everyone else fucked off or got better opportunities or retired, and they're the only 2 people that are left from a previous era, and so they have to fight each other.
And WWE has beat it into everybody's heads that this is, well, we're going to do it again. And it meant so much because we've done it a bunch of times. And I said before, they should not have had Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker, Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker, Triple H versus Undertaker, Triple H versus Undertaker. We wasted 4 years over what should have been a 2-match thing. There should not have been a rematch of Shawn Michaels and a rematch of Triple H. It definitely shouldn't have been the case.
Now that I didn't mind as much, because I will say, the matches that they had, Triple H and The Undertaker, those two Mania ones, they're great. And specifically the Hell in a Cell tells a great story. But, especially in recent years, this idea that, oh, they're the rivalry one last time, Super Showdown, it just wasn't that serious. In fact, you can go on the network and see that at one point in their careers, Triple H was getting squashed by The Undertaker. You know, it just doesn't work for me. Now, Shawn Michaels, I'm going to say yes, and I understand why you might think, oh, well, the early half of it doesn't work for you. But here's the thing, they parallel so beautifully. They do the first Hell in a Cell. Undertaker retires Shawn Michaels the first time. Then, you know, Shawn comes back from that. They keep each other away. They come into this great story at WrestleMania 25. Maybe best match ever.
It's my pick for my favorite match ever.
And then, you know, Shawn keeps getting the better of him because Taker never actually beat Shawn. And then Taker beats him, and Shawn becomes obsessed because he's still kind of the prick Shawn Michaels who's just like, no, I have to win everything. And then he loses, and that's where he retires. And I think that story is so good that, yeah, Shawn should be on the Mount Rushmore, not Hunter.
Yeah,
But I look at this as, if you lump the Triple H feud in as part of the Shawn Michaels storyline, and you can say, it's almost cheating to a certain extent. If you can say one spot on the Mount Rushmore goes to Shawn Michaels and Triple H, then yeah. But I would not give a spot to Shawn Michaels and a spot to Triple H, and I feel like the Triple H thing is part of the Shawn Michaels feud.
No,
That's ignoring the fact that they've had their match at WrestleMania years before that in the what was it, WrestleMania? Was it 17?
Yeah,
Is that what
17.
it was? Yeah, okay. Like, that's ignoring the fact that that has nothing to do with Shawn Michaels. But, like, do you know what I mean? Almost like the Shawn Michaels thing that carries over into the whole Triple H last time ever, end of an era type of thing like that. And it's like, without Shawn Michaels being there, the Triple H thing isn't happening. And all
no,
that.
dude.
Yeah, that's
no.
that. I mean, I get where he's coming from, but then I also would argue that point of thing that you need the Shawn Michaels thing for the Triple H to happen, but you don't need the Triple H thing to happen for the Shawn Michaels thing to happen. So Shawn Michaels is the feud. Triple H is completely ancillary.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
H
You add the Triple H stuff underneath the Shawn Michaels thing.
But then I also agree with Rob that Shawn Michaels is big enough on his own that he could command a place on the Mount Rushmore thing because of his feud with The Undertaker.
The Triple H feud is literally predicated on, hey, you son of a bitch, Shawn's better than you. Oh, you motherfucker! How dare you say that to me? It's like, no, it's taking a 5-course meal and stuffing it with GMOs if you add Triple H onto the Shawn Michaels thing.
Yeah.
I would say, though, that, like, if you have to go between that, there is no Triple H feud without Shawn Michaels. And as much as some people would be like, well, Triple H and Undertaker, great feud, all this rivalry, all this kind of stuff that WWE touts, just, it would not happen without the Shawn Michaels thing. Yeah. So
you're preaching to the choir here. We're all in complete agreement that Triple H should not be on this Mount Rushmore.
No, it's you say Shawn Michaels with the asterisk of extra added boost over the years from Triple H dragging this on. Like, that Shawn Michaels feud looks bigger in retrospect because they kept it going because of the Triple H thing. Yeah. You know?
I'd probably add the asterisk that said, like, the Shawn Michaels on there, and then asterisk, Triple H almost ruined it by stretching this out too long.
Yeah, like that type of thing. And then there's the big one.
Yeah.
Well, did we go through everybody that we need to go through?
I think we did, except for the big one.
I feel like we've covered pretty much everyone.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure before it's like, oh, we didn't mention.
Well, I mean, is there any way that we can end this other than talking about Hayden Vanson?
Oh yeah, well, listen, that feud is legendary because it was so good it didn't even happen.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is Kane.
All right. So
On pure character development alone, this is a guaranteed must. It made a whole other person's career.
it's the only
It's
reason.
the best version of fake Undertaker that you can get. It's a whole. It's the soap opera element of wrestling to the max degree. The matches might not be the best in comparison to like Undertaker Batista is better than Undertaker Kane, but I feel like Kane is an absolute must.
Kane is an absolute must.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I don't know if we can just go around and say it now. The only two guarantees I had were Mankind and Kane.
Yeah, those were
same,
the only
yeah.
two guarantees. So it's
They were the first two I put on my list because because like Tony says, the matches with Kane are really nothing too special. They're nothing that's so disparate from his other matches with the like Monster of the Week type thing. It's just a big guy who wrestles another big guy. Kane is a much more competent wrestler than most of them, and he's gotten better over time as well. And obviously, he's one of the few people who can really match Undertaker power for power, which made their matches good. But it's the story that surrounds them, both as opponents, as tag team partners. The fact that they fought each other anywhere from late '97 all the way through to about 2010, they were in feuds with each other, like on and off, and they were occasionally tag team partners. They came back recently, like 2018, tag team partners. It's just you can't mention one without the other at this point.
Yeah, it's an absolute, like, there's no discussion for the most part for it. If you don't think that Kane should be in the Mount Rushmore of Undertaker opponents,
Then
and
you haven't been
feuds,
watching, period.
you're not a wrestling fan, essentially. It's, again, if we were to say top 4 best wrestling in-ring opponents for The Undertaker, no, it wouldn't be Kane, because they haven't had the absolute best matches, but Mankind and Kane are number 1 and number 2. What you flip-flop them around, whatever you want to do.
And one led right into the other. Mankind's the whole face burning thing led right into the Kane story. Kane, I'm gonna disagree with you guys. I think the WrestleMania 14 match was the first ever really good match on the streak. And Kane in that 98 era was so good. Like you said, Tony, it's fake Undertaker, but with so much more story and care given to it. I think Undertaker and Kane are the only two where they can just stand in a ring and do poses and have lightning strike. And you're like, yep, I buy this. I want to see these two fucking guys fight with their magical powers. It's the only story that works. And they've tried this. They've had Bray Wyatt, Mordecai, Kevin Thorne. They've had these supposed mythical characters, but it works with Kane and Taker. And then you get into the whole story of, well, guess what? We're actually in cahoots. And that ties into the whole Austin thing we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And, you take it even further. When somebody was stalking his wife, Undertaker got his big, freaky brother to come kick the guy's ass with him. And then you take that all the way to when it was time for the biker to end. Who did it but Kane? But actually burying the Undertaker to allow for that amazing comeback at WrestleMania, which saw Kane get squashed, but that's okay because the dead man was back. And then all the way through 2010, where you bring back Paul Bearer, you do this story again, and it just works. They are the best form of sports entertainment ever told. Period.
It's the big man thing, the way that we've talked about with like Gonzales and Yokozuna and all them. It's the best story thing. It's one of the only instances where people have been quote unquote related and they've just kept it over the years. Great quotes like "Kane is alive, Undertaker," and all this like kind of stuff. That's gotta be Kane. Like all this, it's just it's Mankind and Kane. They're locked in. Number 2 of the spots out of the way.
Honestly,
certain.
my biggest regret with the fake Kane angle was that it was supposed to be that that person was the real Kane, and imagine how you could have tied all that in to the Undertaker, because that's just such a good story, no matter how hokey it might be. And Callum, I'm sure you're just going to echo everything we've just said.
Well, pretty much. I don't think the fake Kane would have added too much to the situation. But other than that, yeah, it's a great storytelling feud that's really soap opera-y. It's like a really mix of horror, soap opera, and then you add a little bit of wrestling in there as well.
Yeah.
Just everything else is just the drama surrounding it, but it's really like really attitude era stuff, which was very compelling at the time. I think when you go back and look at it, it comes across maybe a bit too soap opera and very, very over dramatic, but at the time it just worked perfectly, and it still works really.
And I think bonus points because 98 Kane had one of the coolest entrance themes and entrances ever.
So cool. We got to pick two more. This is where the voting kind of gets a little bit like, let's find things a little bit difficult. And oh, by the way, if you're voting, you should be voting on the Sexiest Superstars tournament. That's happening. We're on the final right now, so vote on either Liv Morgan or Sasha Banks because you're all crazy and go with Alexa Bliss and Becky Lynch. And there's Finn Balor and Tyler Bate. So vote on that while you can. Poll's going to shut off at some point. I don't know when, especially because they added another fucking pay-per-view this week, so now that changes my whole schedule around. So we'll see. I don't know. But vote on the tournament. That's happening. So we need two more spots. Now, on my list of things that I think are potentials, there's the Shawn Michaels little asterisk thing. There's Brock Lesnar. Ultimately, I know that you guys are going to say no, but I would say $1 Million Corporation's worth at least a little bit of discussion, but I mean, it's probably not going to make it on there. Batista, Edge, Yokozuna, Randy Orton, and Stone Cold. Am I missing
I would
anybody?
get rid of Austin and the Corporation right away.
Was Orton on that one?
Yeah,
I'd get rid of Orton as well.
yeah.
All voting to get rid of Orton?
Yeah. I'm getting rid of Orton.
All right. Yeah, so should I just bite the bullet and say everybody's rolling out $1 Million Corporation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I will say, if there was a rule where it was like, okay, you have to have one from this era, one from this era, my early era would be Yokozuna.
Yokozuna's, I think, worth the discussion. Well, all right, so we got Batista, Edge, Yoko, Austin, Michaels, Lesnar.
Get rid of Austin.
I would get rid of Yokozuna before I got rid of Austin. Just because, I'm slightly biased in the sense that I've never really gone back too often to the New Generation era. But from what I recall, it was Undertaker against Yokozuna at SummerSlam or Royal Rumble or some event like that, and he buries the Undertaker in a casket. Undertaker gets lifted away to the heavens, and then he comes back at a later event, and Chuck Norris helps him beat Yokozuna.
Well, I mean, the Chuck Norris involvement automatically gets him a spot on the Mount
Rushmore. I think for sheer longevity and the fact that they fought each other in multiple eras, and the fact that it was for the WWE Championship and was one of the most prominent main event slots, supersedes the fact that the Yokozuna thing may have been slightly cool.
Well, then I'll say this. I can argue points for all three of Batista, Michaels, or all four of Batista, Michaels, Edge, and Lesnar. Get rid of Yoko and Austin, and then we have a long discussion as to who gets on here.
If you were to just say your two, who would you go with right now?
My two extra choices. Michaels and Batista.
I think I'm going Michaels and Edge.
So I say, you know what? Because I don't know who I would pick. I say if you guys have two for Michaels with that thing, I'll third that and say Michaels with that little asterisk of you gotta incorporate the Triple H stuff into it as under that umbrella.
I refuse to have the Triple H attachment to any of this. I want the Triple H asterisk removed.
You forced this asterisk, which I'm very
Yeah.
surprised about. I thought I was the Triple H guy here.
Yeah,
But
I
think our wires are crossed about it though. I don't think I'm not trying to get Triple H onto the list. I'm trying to say that the Shawn Michaels feud carried because of Triple H,
but I
and
don't think you need to
it's
say
Shawn
it.
Michaels.
You just need to let it be Shawn Michaels, and you know.
Yeah, I want to pretend the Triple H thing never happened.
Like, because to me, the Shawn Michaels feud, this starts with that whole Bret Hart match with the Michaels hits Undertaker with the chair.
Yeah,
it starts there and it ends at Saudi Arabia. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, but I can
so that
that
incorporates
point of view,
the DX kind of element to it.
Like you can incorporate the DX element of it. I would just carry out anything that involved Triple H versus Undertaker 1-on-1.
I think that's just part of the story. It's like because that's the end of the era type thing, and
but what
that
does
helps.
that say about Shawn? Like that's just how much Shawn's rivalry meant to the Undertaker. I don't think you need the asterisk. I think you just need to it's Shawn's rivalry.
Yeah.
The asterisk to me is for people that'll go, well, why wouldn't you give it to Triple H? And be like, because it's a Shawn Michaels story.
Person who wants to give it to Triple H, I'm telling you why, because it didn't mean as much.
It's the Shawn Michaels thing. He kicked it off. He ended it. It's not a Triple H feud. It's a Shawn Michaels feud.
I think we've thoroughly explained the fact why we don't want to put Triple H on this on this thing, because essentially his feud doesn't exist and doesn't matter if Shawn Michaels hadn't feuded with the Undertaker first.
Yeah, so that's why Shawn Michaels, one of the spots on the Mount Rushmore. Then
yes, Shawn Michaels alone with no asterisks next to his name is on this Mount Rushmore.
I don't want to be so quick to dismiss Lesnar though.
I know
Lesnar is important.
I think the three that we're really kind of discussing between for the next final one are Edge, Batista, and Brock Lesnar.
I would go with Edge more than Batista. And I could see an argument for Brock Lesnar more than Batista.
I mean, the reason I'd like the Batista one is just because it's different. But I can understand that it's a shorter time span than the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I have to take that into account for that side of things. And due to the fact that even though it was a heated rivalry, it wasn't a heel versus babyface one, which is more traditional. So I'm happy to, even though my gut is to say Batista, and if it was just my individual one, I'd still put Batista on it because I just enjoyed that feud a lot. In terms of significance, I'm willing to cut him off and just make it a shootout between Lesnar and Edge.
I don't know. Batista's, it's a really good rivalry. I would almost argue that the Edge stuff plays right off the back of it. So there's you can start adding your asterisks because it's all the three of them ruled SmackDown for 3 years. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, very much so in the main event scene. Just trade the title between those three for a while.
I'll put it out there. I'll stamp my thing down. I'm saying my fourth goes to Edge, and if we had to pick between Batista and Brock, I would go with Brock.
Like I say, I'm fine cutting Batista off. Between Brock and Edge, the Edge one I think is arguably more entertaining, which is obviously a good factor in the side of things, and helped establish Edge. It was top of the SmackDown card for a while. The thing with the Brock Lesnar stuff is that it is very disparate between two sides of it. It's a very raw, young Brock Lesnar on one side of things, and on the other side, it's the established, UFC champion Brock Lesnar that we're familiar with nowadays.
Yeah, you go with the Undertaker's feud/opponent, Mount Rushmore should have the guy who is representational of Undertaker can't beat him? Or do you go with the one that's the overall more entertaining matches and feud?
I personally, I lean closer to Brock just because I think even though for all the fun and better matches that we got out of Edge and Undertaker, nothing in the feud between Edge and the Undertaker was significant as breaking the streak.
And that makes sense to me. I don't like Brock Lesnar in a lot of ways, but it makes sense. I'd be comfortable with Brock Lesnar being that fourth option.
But if you're leaning towards Edge and I'm leaning towards Lesnar, it kind of goes down to what Rob wants, really.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: is Edge is one of. I'd be lying if I said that Edge wasn't at the very top of my personal Mount Rushmore just for wrestling. Edge was such a monumental character for me, and I think this feud was so important and good, and it established that Taker could really go. But then you just gotta. Brock Lesnar broke the streak, and that just, by all rights, he might own a part of this Mount Rushmore even more than Shawn Michaels because he broke the streak. It just that defined the Undertaker, and Brock took that away. The large reason why Undertaker doesn't mean as much today is because Brock Lesnar broke the streak. If the streak still existed, WrestleMania with the Undertaker would still mean a lot. With Brock breaking the streak, Brock took part of the Undertaker's existence. I gotta go Brock Lesnar.
I think that seals it then.
Yeah, that's the four.
Which then makes me wonder if we had a B tier, which we do this sometimes.
Yeah.
Batista, Edge, there are two of them.
Austin and Yokozuna, I guess, really. Maybe
either Austin and Yokozuna, or we just say Yokozuna and corporations, because $1 Million Corporation and the corporation. Undertaker versus a corporation.
Undertaker versus corporations. Just like he's taking down Wall Street one tombstone at a time.
And I would say Batista, Edge, Yoko, and Austin.
Yeah, but I think that's a good list though. Kane,
I think that's it. So Kane, Mankind, Shawn Michaels, and Brock Lesnar.
Real quick, Mount Rushmore of the worst feuds. I say Giant Gonzales, DDP, King Mabel, and the Corporation.
I'd probably go Giant Gonzales, DDP, Muhammad Hassan, and probably. Oh, there's so many to choose from on my negative side.
Right.
I actually get a strange amount of enjoyment from the hide and right one. I'd probably go Carly.
Fair.
DDP is definitely on the list, and
so is
Gonzales has to be because he's representational of just like that awful, why did you even bother kind of thing. I don't know about the other two.
Fake Undertaker, maybe?
Kali and Kozlov. Why not? Yeah, so that's our Mount Rushmore of Undertaker opponents, Undertaker feuds. It's Mankind, Kane, Shawn Michaels, and Brock Lesnar. And if you agree or disagree, drop a comment below and tell us what you think about all this discussion that we just had here. Tell us what you think about Mount Rushmore. This is our 5th one of them, and I think it's one of the better segments that we've got going on. It's a lot of fun to do these kind of things. So if you want us to do another one, head up to Patreon. That's the best way to do that, because we have the option for you to request different special features and stuff. And other ideas that you have of potential ones that you might want us to do in the future, drop them in the comments below as well. Let's go on the plug side of things. The only thing that I haven't mentioned yet from my side is fanboysanonymous.com. I'm going to, hopefully, knock on wood, see The Lion King this week and put up a review point of that. And we'll see about anything else that's happening. I know Comic-Con's going on right now. I haven't checked a single thing that's happened with it today, so Weekend Geek's going to incorporate some of that stuff. Trailer reactions or whatever, I don't know. You can follow me all over the place. eWrestling News, Bleacher Report, Tony Mango, A Mango Tree, etc., etc. Just go to smarkoutmama.com, follow all that stuff. Go to fanboysanonymous.com, follow all that stuff. Pay attention. So, Rob?
Before I give my plugs, I want to say Comic-Con, Mattel released a WWE Ghostbusters line with Undertaker as the main ghost and main villain, and the 4 Ghostbusters trying to get the Undertaker are Shawn Michaels, The Rock, Stone Cold, and John Cena. I just think that's
So
a funny toy line.
You got to get rid of John Cena and The Rock there and replace it with Kane and.
Well, but then you put Kane and Mankind on the ghost side of things. And before I go way too deep into this, let me just give my plugs. At Dude Police on Twitter and Instagram, WrestleZone.com, the WrestleZone Daily, eWrestlingNews.com for your daily wrestling news. The Ring Report is something I contribute to sometimes. Check out all the weeklies. 2001 Wrestling Odyssey, which is the podcast I do with the wonderful Callum Wiggins, who's going to tell you more about that, Callum.
Yes, I am the wonderful one. And you can listen to more 2001 Wrestling Odyssey on the Smark Moment YouTube channel and podcast platforms everywhere we're out. Got episodes for every single month, stretching back from January, February, March, April, May, June. That's how months work. And one for WrestleMania X7 as well, just a little extra. So check it out and see how we travel back in time and explore what wrestling was like 18 years ago. And then you can also check out the Power Rankings, as well as all the other weekly articles on smartcomoment.com. And if you're so inclined, you can follow me on Twitter at Wigmeister14.
All right, everybody, that's going to do us in for this Mount Rushmore. Thank you for listening to this, and thank you for all of your continued support in whatever fashion that it might be. We will see you next time, probably in the hot tags, and then next week we are going to do the final wrap-up of the Sexy Superstars tournament, and I guess potentially this fucking Smackville thing, because that's happening, but we might incorporate that into the hot tags. I might just not do it at all. I'm just be perfectly honest with you. I might not do a podcast about that, because I just kind of don't want to. And if it's just a regular standard live event, the way that the last chapter, whatever the Shield thing was, then I don't think that there's going to be as much to really talk about either. So we're going to see what's happening there. There's going to be coverage on smarkoutmoment.com, one fashion or another, but we'll see closer on to next week, and things will play out the way that they play out. But for now, this is going to do us in. This has been another Smart Out Moment, and we're being counted out.